March 28, 1942, 0130 hours, the Loire Estuary, Western France. Motor launch 306, a 70-ton wooden boat powered by petrol engines, is threading upriver toward the most heavily defended port on the Atlantic coast, St Nazaire. Her hull is double-planked mahogany over plywood frames. Her fuel tanks sit exposed on deck. Her heaviest weapon is a single 3-pounder gun designed before the First World War. Ahead, the destroyer HMS Campbelltown, packed with delayed-action explosives, is driving toward the Normandy dry dock. Around 3:06, 15 other motor launches carry commandos into the teeth of German coastal batteries. Every one of them was assembled from a kit. Not a kit designed by a shipyard, a kit cut and shaped by furniture factories, piano makers, and cabinet workshops across the English Midlands. 6 lorry loads of pre-cut timber per boat, delivered to riverside yards where men bolted them together like oversized flat-pack furniture. Within the hour, 12 of those 16 motor launches will be burning, sinking, or blown apart. Aboard 306, Sergeant Thomas Durrant of No. 1 Commando will man the after-Lewis gun against the German torpedo boat Jaguar, a vessel more than 10 times his boat's displacement. He will refuse to stop firing even after being hit repeatedly. He will die of his wounds. His Victoria Cross recommendation will come from the German captain who tried to kill him. A wooden boat, built by furniture makers, crewed by reservists, sailing into the most fortified harbour in occupied Europe. That was a Fairmile B motor launch. Over 600 were built. They fought in the English Channel, the Mediterranean, the Aegean, the Indian Ocean, the coast of Burma, the waters off West Africa, and the beaches of Normandy. They swept mines, hunted submarines, escorted convoys, landed commandos, and guided the largest invasion fleet in history onto the correct stretch of sand. How did a mass-produced wooden boat, assembled from kits by workers who had never built a ship, become the most versatile small warship of the Second World War? The answer begins in 1938, when a former racing car manufacturer named Noel Macklin read a paper that frightened him. Vice Admiral Cecil Usborne had warned the Admiralty that Britain possessed almost no modern small craft for coastal defence, anti-submarine patrol or harbour protection. The destroyer fleet was stretched to breaking point. Corvettes had not yet entered production, and the specialist boatyards capable of building fast naval craft, firms like Vosper, Thornycroft and British Powerboat, could only produce a handful of vessels per year. Macklin saw the problem differently than the Admiralty planners. He was an engineer who had founded the Invicta and Railton motorcar companies. He understood mass production, and he understood that Britain's real manufacturing capacity was not concentrated in a dozen shipyards. It was scattered across thousands of small woodworking firms, furniture makers, and joinery shops that had no connection to the sea whatsoever. His proposal was radical. Design a warship that could be broken down into standardized components, manufactured inland by any competent woodworker using precision jigs, packed into lorry-sized crates, and assembled at small boatyards along the coast. Build boats the way Henry Ford built cars. Free the specialist yards to produce the fast attack craft, the motor torpedo boats and motor gun boats that only they could build. Let the furniture factories handle the rest. The Admiralty was sceptical. Warships were not furniture. The tolerances were different. The stresses were different. A boat that came apart in a channel gale would kill its crew and discredit the entire programme. But Macklin had a powerful ally in Usborne, who became a director of the new company. Fairmile Marine was established in 1939, named after Macklin's country estate in Surrey. The garage at Cobham Fairmile became the first workshop. The company operated without profit, its staff effectively civil servants, receiving orders directly from the Director of Naval Contracts. The first Fairmile design, the Type A, had a hard chine hull that handled poorly at low speed. The Admiralty's own designer, W.J. Holt, head of the Director of Naval Construction's boat section, drew a new round-bilged hull based on destroyer lines. The result was the Fairmile B, and it was everything the Type A was not: seaworthy, stable, and above all simple to build. If the concept failed, Britain would have wasted thousands of tons of mahogany and hundreds of engines on boats that could not fight. If it succeeded, the Royal Navy would gain a fleet of small warships faster than any conventional shipbuilding program could deliver. It succeeded beyond anything Macklin or the Admiralty imagined. The Fairmile B measured 112 feet in length with a beam of 18 feet 3 inches. Displacement was 85 tons. 2 Hall Scott Defender petrol engines, each producing 650 brake horsepower, drove her to a maximum speed of 20 knots. Range was 1,500 nautical miles at 12 knots. The signature feature was not speed or firepower, it was modularity. The deck was pre-drilled with steel strips and tapped mounting holes that allowed the entire weapons fit to be reconfigured within 48 hours. A single hull could serve as a submarine hunter 1 week, a minesweeper the next, and a commando transport the week after that. Standard armament included a 3-pounder gun forward, twin Lewis or Vickers machine guns, 12 depth charges, and ASDIC submarine detection equipment. As the war progressed, boats received 20mm Oerlikon cannon, 2-pounder pom-pom guns, and eventually 40mm Bofors. The kit system was the production miracle. Components arrived at assembly yards in 6 packages, each sized for a standard 15-ton lorry. Over 40 yards across, Britain assembled the hulls. 88 more were built in Canada, 35 in Australia, 12 in New Zealand. Others came together in South Africa, Egypt, India, Bermuda, and Jamaica. The Egyptian boats were assembled by Thomas Cook and the Anglo-American Nile Tourist Company in Cairo, firms whose previous expertise was building river cruise boats for sightseers. The first Fairmile B, motor launch 113, launched from Tough Brothers Yard at Teddington on August 12, 1940. Within 3 years, the class outnumbered every other type of small warship in Royal Navy service. Their first sustained combat test came not in the English Channel, but 1,500 miles south, at Malta. During the siege of 1941 and 42, the island's approaches were laced with Axis mines. The fleet minesweepers, larger trawlers designed for the job, were being destroyed by air attack because their steel hulls and deeper draft made them easy targets and vulnerable to magnetic detonation. The Fairmile Bs drew less than 5 feet of water. Their wooden hulls did not trigger magnetic mines. They were, almost by accident, the only vessels that could sweep the harbour approaches and survive. Lieutenant Gordon Stead of the Royal Canadian Naval Volunteer Reserve commanded Motor Launch 126 and eventually became senior officer of the 3rd ML Flotilla, the first motor launch flotilla deployed overseas from Britain. His crews had no formal minesweeping training. They learned the procedure in the minefields themselves. Each time they cut a mine loose, they painted a small mine silhouette on the funnel. When a specially trained minesweeping officer arrived from Britain and asked where Stead's men had learned their trade, the answer was simple. Right out there in the bloody minefield, sir. What made the improvisation possible was the Fairmile B's shallow draft, just 4 feet 10 inches fully loaded, which allowed the wooden hulls to pass directly over mines that would have destroyed any heavier vessel. The 3rd Flotilla swept the approaches to Grand Harbour throughout the worst of the siege, then went on to serve as navigation leaders during the invasion of Sicily in July 1943. From late 1943, the motor launches moved into the Aegean and Adriatic for a different kind of war, clandestine operations. Landing and recovering special air service, special boat service, and long-range desert group raiders among the German-occupied Greek islands. Motor Launch 357, built in Cairo by the Anglo-American Nile Tourist Company, served with the 42nd ML Flotilla in the Eastern Mediterranean. In September 1943, she took part in Operation Gander, landing special forces at Castel Orizo. On the night of January 8, 1944, 357 and Motor Launch 836 intercepted and captured a 30-ton Axis Caïque. In February, she sank another Caïque off Cape Creo, taking 7 prisoners. In May, a third off Halki. In June, she bombarded a German searchlight position on Kos. In October 1944, Motor Launch 357 was the first Allied vessel to enter Piraeus harbour at the liberation of Athens, 1 boat, built by a tourist company, first into the capital of a liberated nation. The Aegean campaign reached its peak with Operation Tenement, the raid on the island of Symi in July 1944. A force of motor launches and schooners landed approximately 100 men of the Special Boat Service under Major Ian Laprake and 224 soldiers of the Greek Sacred Band under Colonel Christodoulos Tsigantes. The Axis garrison lost 21 killed and 151 captured. 1 German S-boat, 2 ferry barges, and 19 Caïques were destroyed. Allied casualties were a handful of wounded and 2 drowned. The heaviest warships in the Allied force were 70-ton wooden motor launches. Then came St Nazaire, Operation Chariot. The action that tested the Fairmile B to destruction and beyond. 16 motor launches accompanied HMS Campbelltown up the Loire. Most carried commandos and 500-gallon auxiliary fuel tanks strapped to their open decks. They were, in every measurable sense, floating incendiary devices. When the German batteries opened fire, the petrol ignited. Motor Launch 268 exploded with a single survivor. Motor Launch 192 and 262 were set ablaze. Motor Launch 177, which had taken off part of Campbelltown's crew, was sunk trying to escape the estuary. 12 of the 16 launches were lost. Aboard Motor Launch 306, Sergeant Thomas Durrant manned the twin Lewis gun on the aft mounting as the German torpedo boat Jaguar closed to point-blank range. Jaguar displaced over 900 tons, 306 displaced 70. Durrant fired continuously even after being wounded multiple times. He refused every demand to surrender. He died of his wounds after the boat was captured. What happened next was almost without precedent in the war. Jaguar's commanding officer, Captain Lieutenant Paul, was so struck by Durrant's defiance that when he later encountered Lieutenant Colonel Charles Newman in the prisoner of war camp at Rennes, Paul suggested that Newman might wish to recommend the sergeant for a high decoration. The Victoria Cross was gazetted on June 15, 1945, recommended by the enemy. Motor Launch 306 herself was captured intact and pressed into German service as RA9, the only Fairmile B ever operated by the Kriegsmarine. She was destroyed by Allied bombing during the air raid on Le Havre in June 1944, a British boat built by British furniture makers, sunk by British bombs. On June 6, 1944, over 50 Fairmile B motor launches took part in Operation Neptune, the naval component of the Normandy invasion. Many served as navigation leaders, a role that required threading through mined waters in darkness to mark the correct landing points for waves of assault craft following behind. These boats were fitted with splinter mats forward, Oerlikon cannon amidships, Bofors guns aft, and smoke-generating apparatus to screen the approaching invasion fleet. Motor Launch 303 became the iconic example, guiding landing craft onto the beaches through obstructed and mined waters while under fire from shore batteries. The mine-sweeping flotillas that cleared the 10 approach lanes to the beaches included Fairmile Bs, their wooden hulls once again proving their worth over magnetic mines that would have detonated beneath steel vessels. Rear Admiral Alan Kirk of the United States Navy called the mine-sweeping the keystone in the arch of this operation. The boats that made it possible had been built by piano makers 3 years earlier. In the Far East, South Africa's 49th Fairmile Flotilla deployed to the Arakan coast of Burma, where motor launches bombarded Japanese shore defences, cut river communications, and ran clandestine insertions for the Special Operations Executive, covering some 30,000 miles in over 40 operations. Indian-built launches of the Burma Royal Naval Volunteer Reserve ran night missions dropping and recovering SOE agents behind Japanese lines. 9 Fairmile Bs took part in Operation Dracula, the amphibious invasion of Rangoon, in May 1945. In the Pacific, Australian-built boats worked alongside American PT boats around New Guinea. The Japanese surrender of Kairiru and Mushu Islands was accepted aboard Motor Launch 805 on September 10, 1945. Across the Atlantic, Canadian Fairmile Bs, nicknamed Holy Rollers for the violence of their pitching in North Atlantic swells, escorted coastal convoys and hunted U-boats in the Gulf of St Lawrence and off Newfoundland. In West Africa, large numbers patrolled out of Freetown, Sierra Leone, guarding the convoy assembly point that funneled supplies to the Mediterranean and the Far East. From the Loire to the Irrawaddy, from Grand Harbour to the beaches of Normandy, from the Aegean Islands to the coast of New Guinea, wooden boats, assembled from kits, fighting in every ocean of the war. If you're finding this deep dive interesting, subscribing helps more than you know. The obvious comparison is the German E-boat, the Schnellboot. Late war S-boats measured approximately 115 feet, comparable in length to the Fairmile B. The similarity ended there. E-boats were diesel-powered, which made them far less vulnerable to fire than the petrol-driven British launches. They were partially armoured, they carried 20 and 40mm cannon plus torpedoes, and they could sustain 43 knots or more than double the Fairmile B's maximum speed. On paper, the E-boat was the superior vessel in every category. In practice, the two boats were designed for entirely different wars. The E-boat was an offensive weapon, built to strike fast, launch torpedoes at merchant convoys, and run before escort forces could respond. The Fairmile B was a defensive workhorse, built to be present, to patrol, to endure, and to fill whatever role the situation demanded. The American equivalent was the 80-foot PT boat, powered by 3 Packard petrol engines, capable of 40 knots and armed with 4 torpedoes, fast, glamorous, and heavily publicised. The PT boat was a sprinter. The Fairmile B was a marathon runner. The American boat could strike and flee. The British boat could escort a convoy for 1,500 nautical miles, sweep a minefield, and land a raiding party the same week. The closest American analogue was actually the 110-foot SC-type submarine chaser, a vessel so similar in concept that 8 Canadian-built Fairmile Bs were transferred directly to the United States Navy as submarine chasers SC-1466 through SC-1473. Same length, same role, same wooden construction. The Americans recognised the design for exactly what it was. The E-boat outclassed the Fairmile B in every engagement metric: speed, armour, armament, survivability. The Royal Navy knew this, which is precisely why they developed the larger, faster Fairmile D, the dog boat, with 4 Packard engines and 30-knot capability, specifically to counter the S-boat threat. But the E-boat cost vastly more to build, required specialist yards, and Germany produced fewer than 300 throughout the entire war. Britain produced over 600 Fairmile Bs from furniture factories and piano workshops. When the Kriegsmarine sent 12 E-boats into the Channel, the Royal Navy could answer with 60 motor launches and still have hundreds more on station from Freetown to Rangoon. The E-boat won engagements, the Fairmile B won the war of presence, and presence, across every ocean and every theatre, was what Britain needed most. Think back to that night on the Loire. March 1942. Wooden boats burning on the river, Sergeant Durrant firing into the searchlights, a Victoria Cross earned in a vessel built from a kit. The naval establishment said mass production could not deliver a real warship. Noel Macklin proved them wrong. The skeptics said furniture makers could not build boats that would survive combat. The siege of Malta proved them wrong. The analysts who measured warships by speed and armament alone missed the point entirely. The Aegean proved them wrong. Normandy proved them wrong. Burma proved them wrong. Over 600 built, assembled in more than 130 yards across 5 continents. They swept mines off Malta. They landed raiders in the Aegean. They guided the invasion fleet onto the beaches of Normandy. They accepted the Japanese surrender in the Pacific, not because they were fast, not because they were powerful, because they were everywhere. 600 boats, every ocean, every year of the war. The furniture makers built them, the reservists crewed them, and the critics who called them mass-produced meant it as an insult. The Fairmile B made it a strategy.